So the Batman tells the story of Batman hunting down a serial killer who is taking out the elite in Gotham and leaving mysterious riddles. The day is finally upon us, everybody. The Batman is finally here. I got to see it last night at the little fan preview IMAX event. This was easily my most anticipated movie of the year. If I was to stack up all of the movies from the past couple of years that were my most anticipated, this would probably still be number one. I have been waiting for this for so long, and now I get to talk about it. So after all of the drama involved with the Zack Snyder films and Warner Brothers and the Ben Affleck iteration of Batman, I, along with most of us Batman fans, was absolutely crushed when we found out that not only was Ben Affleck not going to do his solo Batman movie that he was supposed to write, direct, and star in, but then eventually said that he was going to be leaving the role altogether. And if anybody on planet Earth could have softened the blow of that news, it was Matt Reeves. Matt Reeves is somebody that I have loved pretty much every single movie that he has done. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is like in my top 10 films of all time. I adore that fucking movie. And as soon as they announced that he was going to be taking over this, and eventually that he was going to be doing a hard-boiled noir detective story, and then eventually the casting of Robert Pattinson, like every single piece of information that came out about this movie over the past 3 or 4 years just got me more and more excited for it, and I was able to easily start to let go of all of my hopes and dreams for the Ben Affleck version of Batman. I'm somebody that has always wanted a detective story for a Batman film. There's been elements of that in even the best Batman movies, but it's never really been the focus. And so once we got that first teaser showing this wildly different interpretation of the Riddler, giving us very David Fincher vibes with like Seven and Zodiac, showing Batman just hunting down a serial killer, and that was the story we were going to be watching with this film, I've been on cloud nine. So does Matt Reeves, the Batman, actually deliver what I and a lot of fans have wanted from this character? Is it something that merits having potentially its own universe and not bothering with the shared universe of the DCEU, not bothering with Superman and larger-than-life alien villains? Is this a movie that finally gets us back on track with Batman? So starting off with the positives for the Batman, like I've already said, I have wanted for potentially decades a movie like this, a movie where Batman is hunting down somebody. He's having to use his detective skills throughout most, if not all, of the movie. I have wanted this version of Batman for so long, and my God, did they deliver every single piece of that version of Batman that I could have ever asked for.
Hands up! Stay still!
How am I part of this? Oh, you're really not as smart as I thought you were.
We all have our different wants and our different ideas for what Batman should be. There's people that love the whimsical style of the Burton Batman films. There's people that love the very crime thriller kind of character study version that we got in the Christopher Nolan films. There's probably even some fans of the Bat Nipples. You gotta give them a shout out. But all of us fans have our different versions, our different pieces of Batman that we really latch onto, that we want to see done well in live action, cartoons, video games, whatever it may be. This is my Batman. From the very beginning of the movie, Batman is a horror character to a certain degree. There's these gorgeous shots in the opening sequences of the movie where you have criminals all throughout Gotham that are doing various crimes, and they look up and see the bat signal, and you just see the change in their face, like, oh my God, we've got to get out of here. Showing shots of alleyways that are dark, and them looking down, just wondering if he's there. Just like he's part of the darkness, he's part of the shadows. Plenty of Batman films have done a good job at showing criminals that don't want to get their ass kicked and know that Batman will do that. This is the first time that I have felt like criminals genuinely piss their pants at the thought of Batman being down that alleyway. And all throughout this is a detective story. This is a murder mystery. This is a noir thriller. This is Batman teaming up with Gordon, looking at clues, looking at murder victims, piecing things together, solving riddles, solving ciphers, trying to investigate people, going where the cops can't go to get information. All throughout the 3-hour runtime of this movie, it is Detective Batman. There's gadgets, there's the Batmobile, there's certain things that he does, there's fight scenes, there's all the elements that you want from all of our traditional versions of Batman, but this is about Batman using his intellect, using his understanding of the criminal underbelly, using his ability to go where the law can't, to try to solve these horrific crimes. And I'll be honest with you, I was actually kind of surprised how far they go with some of these murders. Like, this is a PG-13 movie, but I could easily see just a couple little tweaks and this being a movie that is released as an R-rated film, because the Riddler's crimes are violent. I mean, there is body parts being cut off, there is suggestions of certain things that are happening to victims, there is physically things that are left at the crime where you're like, oh, yeah, are we still in Batman or are we watching Seven? And I love that they go that far, because Batman to me has always lent himself to those darker, more adult, more mature storylines. There's versions of him that make sense to be a little bit more kid-friendly, and those are great for what they do, but I have always craved a movie that will just go there, that will show how dark and fucked up Gotham City can be. Now, filling out this seedy little murder mystery is an absolute perfect cast. Now, we'll start with the big one, of course, Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne and Batman. This, like pretty much every casting we ever get for a Batman movie, the internet loses their mind. Twilight guy? No, bitch, good time guy. Robert Pattinson was great in this role. There is elements to him that I will talk about later on that I hope to see more of in future films, but as far as what this movie was going for, as this broken, destroyed person that's very early on in his career, this very dark and brutal and vicious Batman, I think that he portrayed that perfectly. There was something behind his eyes that was just dead, and that is a version of Batman that we have not quite gotten there yet. We always see elements of that, but this is the darkest, most brutal Batman that we have ever seen. You feel the rage, you feel the pain, you feel like this person that goes out to try to make the city better, but at the same time kind of goes out half hoping that he'll die in a fight, or that he'll get shot trying to save somebody. I mean, there's somebody that's just so mentally destroyed that they would put on this fucked up suit and go out into potentially the worst city of all time and try to make any bit of a difference. There's something not quite psychologically right with that person. And that is portrayed 100% with Robert Pattinson's version of Batman. Paul Dano as the Riddler was awesome. Riddler, again, one of those characters that I have always loved, and I have always hoped to see a certain version of that character. Now, this is certainly a much wilder interpretation than I would have ever imagined, but going all the way back to like when Arkham City came out, I've always said, man, I want to see like a Riddler that's kind of like Jigsaw, like somebody that sets these traps and these riddles, and you die if you don't figure out his riddles. And then eventually we saw the trailer and I'm like, oh my God, they heard me. How did they hear me? I'm bugged. I'm fucking bugged. His Riddler's like 30% Riddler, 30% Zodiac Killer, 30% Jigsaw, 25% Ghostface. I know that's not 100%, but that's the exact formula for his version of Riddler. And the way that he's utilized throughout the film, I thought was very smart, because I have always had an annoyance with Batman films being taken over by the villains and not being a very Batman-centric story, and kind of losing the sight of our main titular character because these villains are just so awesome and so like flamboyant and they just bounce off of the screen like crazy. The Riddler has all of those qualities of all of the best Batman live-action villains, but they utilize him very sparingly. They utilize him to up the tension. They utilize him to up the fear factor of what this guy is, who this guy is, what his plan is, what he is capable of doing. And every single time they go back to the Riddler, you just want more.
You came. I've been trying to reach you.
Zoe Kravitz, great Catwoman. I'm not going to say that she's my favorite Catwoman yet. I think that it's going to be too early to say any of that for any of the castings in this movie, because we need to see how this film franchise develops forward, because these are the very early stages of all these characters. But the version of Catwoman that we get in this movie, I thought was great. She complements Batman very well. I think that it's a very faithful adaptation of the character to where she is kind of a frenemy of Batman. She very much is an ally to him, but will screw him over in a heartbeat to go and do what she wants to do and not listen to a word he says. And I think that back and forth, that pull and tug between their relationships and that complicated relationship that they have was presented very well in the movie. Jeffrey Wright, I loved as Commissioner Gordon. Again, somebody we need to see a few more movies, or maybe even one more, to get different layers to this character, but his relationship with Batman as kind of the only person on the police force that believes in him and that wants to work with him, and kind of developing that bromance. And a lot of this movie really does feel like this buddy cop team up movie between Batman and Gordon. You can almost feel like Gordon takes the role of the Morgan Freeman character in Seven, while Batman is the Brad Pitt character. It really does have that kind of dynamic. One is very tied to the law, one is not. One is very by the book, one is not, and I loved their relationship. I cannot wait to see how those two characters develop throughout this trilogy, 5 film, however many. Give me more, give me a lot more. Colin Farrell as the Penguin was fucking amazing. I am somebody that has never liked the character of Penguin. I've always found him silly. It doesn't matter what iteration we get. If it's the animated series, if it's the Arkham games, if it's Danny DeVito's fish face, it doesn't matter, because I just think this character is silly. He's a gangster who's short and portly and gimpy and has a little fucking spectacle thing on his eye. What's intimidating about that? I've just never really got it. I know there's probably different versions of the character I have not experienced, but I've just always found him a lesser Batman villain. Never understood why he was one of the more popular ones. This version of Penguin, I can't wait to see more. Not only is Colin Farrell just brilliant in the role, because he just is transformative. He disappears. You do not see Colin Farrell. You do not hear Colin Farrell. If you did not know that this was Colin Farrell walking into the movie, I guarantee you 110% you would never figure it out at any point in this movie. You would never look at it and be like, holy shit, is that Colin Farrell? No, he's just gone. Within the prosthetics, within the physical performance, within the actual voice and the dialect that he comes up with, he creates this character. And my God, I can't wait to see more. He's still just a gangster, but he's somebody that has the personality and the attitude and the means to really fuck some shit up for Batman that I want to see that version of Penguin realized. And he's throughout the film very sparingly. He's not a major character, but just like with the Riddler, they utilize him almost perfectly. They utilize him just the right amount, and he is there to propel the plot forward. Every time you get a Penguin scene, it's not to serve Penguin, it's to serve Batman and his story. And even Andy Serkis as Alfred, again, not a whole lot to say here. He's a smaller character, but I loved his version. Every single person that was cast in this movie, I just loved their new version of these characters. It was fucking brilliantly casted. And for as amazing as the Apes films were, this might be Matt Reeves' most beautiful directed film. I mean, the way that he chooses shots, the way that he frames shots, the way that he transitions in scenes, the way that they frame action sequences, as well as these very slow down dark scenes with these murder victims, even like what I was talking about earlier, where he's showing these criminals and he's showing the bat signal and he's going back to their faces and he's showing the darkness of Gotham City and just suggesting that something might be there, kind of like Lee Winnell did in Invisible Man. I loved the way that he used the camera to convey things while nobody was talking. Nobody's telling you how to feel in these scenes. The camera and Matt Reeves is showing you how you need to feel. And for a 3-hour movie that has all brand new iterations of these characters, that has a brand new version of Gotham City, that is literally introducing 3 different villains in this film, as well as smaller villains like Falcone and talking about Sal Maroni and all of these other really smaller villains. For all of the work that this movie had to do, I think that it was really effective and efficient with its storytelling. There is so many things that this movie just really ties itself back in with the way the plot unfolds. The mystery with the Riddler, why he's doing these killings, what his motivation is, what his ultimate goal is, why he's giving these clues specifically to Batman and what his plan for Batman is, how that all comes together, who Bruce Wayne and Batman is psychologically and how does that fit into this new world. What type of Gotham is this? Why is Gotham the worst city ever? How are they going to explain that and convey that to the audience? Is it through the characters? Is it through a bunch of steam and mist? Is it through all these whimsical buildings like the Tim Burton films? Or is it just this seedy underbelly tone that's going all the way throughout it? All of the side characters, where they are in this universe, how do they feel about Batman, and even like the legacy of the Wayne family and how Batman and Bruce Wayne is tied to what the Riddler is trying to convey. All of these things throughout the movie is just slowly peeled back like an onion layer, and every single reveal goes back to the initial mystery, goes back to the first act of the film, goes back to all these inciting incidents, and just kind of reinforces everything plot-wise that we've seen up to that point. Even to the point where the movie finally reaches its natural conclusion, and there's still about 30-40 minutes left, it's almost laid out like a chapter book, to where you don't get like this awesome climax and the movie just cuts to credits to leave you at the edge of your seat. It takes its time to slowly wrap up everything and to close off these little tail ends and to show how these characters have responded to everything, to let us marinate in the aftermath of everything that we have just experienced, everything that these characters have just endured, everything that Gotham has just endured, and giving tiny subtle hints about where things might go in the future, while closing out this movie very satisfying as a singular story. And finally, I loved all of the new elements to Batman. I loved his new suit. I love the way that they explain how he can fly. I love the different pieces of technology that he uses for the actual detective work that we have never seen in this live action type franchise of Batman. I fucking love the new Batmobile. The Batmobile, I'm a muscle car guy. Like, I'm not a big car guy, but I love me some muscle cars, and that's essentially what this Batmobile is. It's a giant souped up muscle car with a fucking jet engine behind it. And when the scene comes where he kicks that bitch on, and when he's chasing down the Penguin, that little scene that we all saw in the trailer, holy shit. I mean, an IMAX theater's got some great ass sound, but when that fucking engine kicked on, I felt it in my balls. Now, it's important to say, there are some things in this movie that I noticed that didn't necessarily bug me, but were things that stood out as, maybe you could have done that a little differently, or, maybe that stood out a little bit more than it should have to me, or mostly, that's probably gonna bother somebody else. But everything negative or mixed that I have to say with this film is literally like a raindrop in an ocean for my experience. My experience with this film was 5 out of 5. My expectations were sky high. Every single one of them were met. Many of them were surpassed. So even tiny little things that I noticed in this film that possibly I would have done differently if I was some masterful filmmaker like Matt Reeves. And I'm going to acknowledge them in this review. Keep in mind, they're almost non-existent as far as my experience of this film. Now, for the mixed elements of Batman, the main one for me, which I feel like I might be on the minority in, is the score, is Michael Giacchino's score. Everybody's been losing their mind about this score ever since the trailers. When the soundtrack was released, I saw Twitter explode with everybody saying that they've been listening to it all day. It is a really great score. It's unique. It's different. It feels very much in line with this version of Batman, and it does have a certain iconic sense to it while not being reminiscent of the Hans Zimmer score or the Danny Elfman score or anything that has come before. However, I do think that the main beat of that score, and we all know what I'm talking about, it's been in all the trailers, bum, 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 I think it's a little overused in the movie. Just that specific section of the score is utilized a lot throughout this movie. In a couple of scenes that I don't feel like that is conveying what needs to be conveyed, such as a fight scene or even random moments throughout the car chase where it would just happen for a second. I don't know. Like I said, very minuscule. It's a nitpick of a nitpick of a nitpick, but there was moments where I was like, could have used a little different flavor of that score in this exact spot. And then we have the character of Bruce Wayne. Not the character of Batman, the character of Bruce Wayne. I think it was absolutely 100% a conscious decision by Matt Reeves, by Robert Pattinson, by the writer, to make Bruce Wayne this very broken, destroyed, fucked up person in this movie. And that is a journey, that is an arc that he is beginning in this movie that is going to go throughout however many sequels this has. And I think that that is a brilliant direction to go. I think it's a unique direction to go, and I can't wait to go on it. But I would be lying if I didn't say that I do like a little bit more personality in my Bruce Wayne side of Batman than I got in this movie. Now, Bruce Wayne's only about this much of the screen time. He's Batman through 95% of this film, but he's the same character. He's the same dark, brooding person as he is with the cowl on, as he is with the cowl off. And that might bug some people. Now moving on to the negatives, and again, to reiterate, these were not really negatives from my experience, but they are things that will bug some people. Depending on what your expectations are, depending on what you want from this movie, the things I'm about to say might affect your experience much more than they affected mine. This is a very long movie. This is a slow burn movie. This is a movie that takes its time. It's a very meticulous with its storytelling. And so if you want fast-paced action, if you want very exciting, if you want fast-moving pace, you're not going to get that in this movie. This is not like The Dark Knight. This is not like Batman Begins. This is not like the Schumacher movies or the Burton films where there's just a lot of fast-moving plot and big, larger-than-life characters and a lot of action sequences. This is a slow-burn detective murder mystery, and it maintains that 100% of the runtime. There's action sequences, there's car chases, there's fight scenes, there's a couple moments of levity that break it up, but it is a very deliberately paced movie. I wanted that, but if you don't want that, this movie's gonna try your patience. There was one element to this Batman's approach to fighting that didn't really bug me, but seemed odd, the way that they did it, kind of overused it throughout the film. There's a scene in the trailer that we've all seen that's fucking badass as an isolated scene, to where he is in a dark hallway and he's just walking towards gunfire like it ain't gonna do shit to him, and it makes him look like this imposing badass. That specific scene does that, but he does that thing about walking towards gunfire with no fucks to give about 5 times in this movie, and I think it makes sense for most of the runtime when you understand this version of Bruce Wayne is almost suicidal, that he's just so broken that he really doesn't care if he dies in the line of fire. When you get into the third act and he's trying to save Gotham and he's still doing that, there was a moment where I was like, that's a little ineffective for your plan there, buddy. And I'm not going to give any specifics, but this specific thing is going to be the only thing in this entire review that anybody could possibly say is even a fraction of a spoiler. So if you don't hear anything, mute me and go on. There is one specific little moment that is meant to tease things for a future film that I could have done without. I think that this movie works brilliantly as an isolated story. I don't think we need to have our hand held anymore and say, here's what's coming next, guys. And so that moment felt very foreign to the pace of the film and to how meticulous the story was and how it was unfolding throughout the movie. That was the only wink and nod moment in the entire film. And while some fans will love that, I'm somebody where I feel like the approach to this movie didn't really necessitate that. In conclusion, guys, this needs to be said. This is a Batman film for me. This is a Batman film that for a certain amount of fans, this is the version of the character, this is the version of Gotham, this is the version of Batman storytelling that we have waited for, that we want, that we love. It's not going to be for everybody. Batman is such a wildly different interpretation of character every single time we get a new iteration. The Burton films have nothing to do with the Schumacher films, which have nothing to do with the Nolan films, which have nothing to do with the Snyderverse, which has nothing to do with this version of Batman. You're never going to please everybody with this character because there's going to be some people that want more of the Adam West, whimsical, kind of campy side of the character. There's people that want the opposite side of that spectrum, like me, that wanted to be very dark and brooding and fucked up. There's somebody that wants it in the middle, like the Nolan films, to where he is certainly broken, but he's also kind of more of an action character in the movies. You're not going to please everybody. Know who you are walking into this film. And please stop this nonsense with Batman fandom to where if you praise the new film, you also have to include shitting on all of the other ones. This film, for me, is brilliant. Just like the Nolan trilogy is brilliant. Just like for some people, the Burton films were brilliant. Just like for some people, the Zack Snyder films were brilliant. We are all fans of the character. Embrace what this new version is. Hopefully you enjoy everything that it brought, but don't go at people that enjoyed something that maybe you did not. And in the same note, if you love this version, don't love it by hating on the other versions. All in all, guys, this movie delivered everything that I wanted and even more. This is one of the best movie experiences that I have had in a very long time. For somebody that has wanted so many specific things from Batman for so long and have just never felt like they were going to get it, and then finally gets all of it gift packaged into one fucking epic masterpiece of a Batman film, I'm on cloud nine as a fan. So if you are a fan of the Batman character and you have always wanted a darker, more vicious and detective version of that character, this is the movie for you. Check it out in the theaters as soon as you can see it, and when it comes out on video, go out and buy it. So what do you guys think of The Batman? Was this the movie for you? Were you blown away at how awesome this was? Or was this just not your Batman? And please let me know reasons down below in a civil fashion. Like, people get so crazy down in the comments. They're probably already going nuts down there. Just watch. They're there. They're coming if they're not. But let me know your thoughts on The Batman. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button because I still have my Batman v Superman review. And of course, we're going to rank all the Batman films. We're going to rank all the Batman actors. We're going to rank the live action villains. Might even do a couple more videos, but we're still going to be talking about Batman for the next week or so on this channel. So hit the subscribe button so you do not miss any of that madness coming your way. Thank you once again for watching. And as always, guys, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.